Good morning, football fans. Happy Wednesday. Hope that the waiver wire fairy treated you well. May recognize a familiar yet new face to the show. Dr. Drew is on vacation. That means that we bring in none other than the GOAT himself, Zachary Smith. Zach, welcome back, my man. How we living?
It's good to be here. Good to be here. I'm happy to step in for Drew for a week. Feels like old times. Well, other than Drew not being here, but back on the fantasy football show. I still try to tap in whenever I can. I'm glad you guys are still keeping it alive, going strong. People in the comments, hello. I'm back for at least 1 week. Yeah, I jumped in here. Was it week 1? Like the very first
Yeah,
episode
you
got
came
back?
on right after the Khalil Shakur.
Yeah, I had to let Drew know that wasn't okay and that couldn't happen. But
Brand rights, like, come on, man. Just like
yeah.
you gotta do better. But yeah, we'll see. Annoying fantasy champions as always in the chat. Eddie P, what's up with you? You've been all City High alum show. Shout out City High Gargoyles, class of 2009. Lettered in drama club and robotics. Talk to me nice.
Wow.
The only 3 things you could letter there in. So, you did it all. If you graduated, it was a big deal. So shout out to all the gargoyles out there. But yeah, man, how's the fantasy season treating you so far? I know you got your hands full, but in a couple of different leagues, holding it down. How's things going?
So I'm like, as much as people that are watching, listening to this might not know, but I've tried to like distance myself from fantasy football. That really hasn't happened. I mean, I'm still in 6 leagues. 3 of them are dynasty and then 3 redrafts. Right now I am 2-0 in 3 of them and 1-1 in the other. So I don't have a winless team right now.
There you go. That's nice. I cannot relate. So got a few.
Let's take a look at my best team and see why that is the case. Oh, this is great. Sleep has got issues right now. Okay, here we go. So my quarter is a 2 QB league. Derek Carr, who's lighting it up right now, obviously. And Joe Burrow, my 2 quarterbacks. Breece Hall, Devon Achane, Nico Collins, stud. Jamar Chase, who really hasn't lit it up yet. Brandon Ayuk. I actually have Luke Musgrave as my tight end 1 on this roster right now.
Wow.
What happened there?
Luke Musgrave,
Njoku on IR. Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a very heavy injury front so far. Speaking of injuries, we'll jump right into it. I am not a doctor by trade, so I do not have the lab coat, but we will try to do our best in the steed of Dr. Drew as we're navigating into the injury updates. Chad, what's up to you? Knew it wouldn't take long to see you in the comments, but
if Chad's still here on a weekly basis.
Yeah, of course. Chad's the man. We've been trying to work on getting on a show for a little bit here and there. We just haven't been able to make it work. He did some stuff for the podathon for Scott Fishbowl, so he pulled it down. Okay. So if you're stuck with Javonte Williams as a starter, is it worth having Jaleel McLaughlin as a handcuff, or is this offense so ruined that a Javonte injury wouldn't make him viable? I think Jaleel was one of those, at least for me, somebody that I was pretty excited to draft as like a dart throw late. He's not really seeing the field. He's not really getting a lot of targets, anything like that. If I'm looking at just like snap counts and things like that from the previous weeks, looking at the game against the Steelers, he's had 14 routes run, but he hasn't been targeted at all. Javonte has 21 and 5. I have to imagine that if they were to have some sort of injury with Javonte, that I think McLaughlin would kind of maybe get more of the predominant passing work, and then they'd figure out what to do with how do you say his last name? Audric Estime, yeah. So I think they'd kind of be like a 1-2 punch, but he's not even seeing the field right now. So to me, redraft Jalil's a drop for me. Anything different from you, Zach?
No, I mean, what's weird is like in 2023, I thought he had his moments last year where I thought he would be the back, and then they move on from Samaje Perine, and I thought that was like arrow pointing up for him, but it's gone in a different direction than I feel like I thought it was going to.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't understand. Obviously, that offense is struggling mightily with Bo Nix as the QB. We've seen a couple of quarterbacks now that are rookies or recently rookies that already have gotten thrown aside for redder rockets and all that good stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think this offense is just going to be a nightmare. I will say the Steelers defense has looked electric. So it's like I can't rule it out completely yet. But Denver definitely had a tough schedule to start the year.
Well, even like I understand that, like the result standpoint, but you brought up the snaps, right? I mean, he had 24 in week 1 down to 17 in week 2. I just yeah, is that really somebody that you're going to put your stock into?
No, that's not. I think I would rather chase other lottery tickets, even just for like a 1 week fill in. You look at like Cam Akers, he's like the only healthy running back right now for Houston. Could be a 1 week play. I don't think Jaleel is like a Kamara situation where it's like, oh, like he just needs that moment to break out. I think that offense is pretty dead in the water, so I wouldn't feel too great
Yeah.
about it. But we'll see what happens. All right, moving into another question from T Money. Welcome to the show. Should I trade Mahomes, Ridley, London for Burrow and Chase? 10-man team: Mahomes, Jacobs, Connor, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Dalton Kincaid, DK Metcalf, Jameson, Williams, bench, Ridley, Carr, Ford, Worthy, Brooks on IR.
What did I just walk into? There's so much going on in that. That was
There's a
a
lot.
whopper of a yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. I feel like I'd rather have Mahomes than Burrow, especially with all of the stuff that's going on. I do find it interesting. I'm not a stack person. I know that that's
Mhm.
very popular in the fantasy community, particularly in situations where you're playing best ball, or you're in like bigger tournaments, because in those like championship weeks, if they can stack and do great, then you've won. I don't like stacks because then if the team has a bad week or gets shut out, then your fantasy season like is
Mm,
an immediate L.
that's
So
an
I
interesting point.
yeah,
I've
I
kind of viewed it as always like a tiebreaker for me. If I'm like pretty close on 2 players
yeah,
and I can get a stack, I typically lean that way, but I
yeah.
certainly don't chase them.
No, I feel that. So let me take a look at a resource that I use pretty frequently. I'm also going to pull this up on the screen so that y'all can see this as well. But there's a trading tool that I like to use in particular for real and for redraft. This is something that's published on Draft Sharks as well. So there's a guy, his name's Alex. He's been posting these on Reddit for a while, but they've gained a lot of traction. And this is like a way that I can figure out like, hey, like how do I feel about sort of trades like this? So let's see
Mhm.
if we can share the screen here. And then I'm going to pull the comment down just so that y'all can see what's going on. But so here's kind of the trade chart that you have, right? So if you're looking at this, basically the trade value that you see here on the left, that's going to give you kind of like a sense of like what's the value for that player. So if we're looking at Jamar Chase, currently sitting at like a 55, the other players that we see here in this trade are going to be Ridley and London. So if we're looking at Ridley and London, so London's at like a 32. Ridley's probably going to be a little bit further down. So let's see here. We'll keep going. We'll keep going. I think, did I miss him? Maybe not even on here. I find it hard to believe. Oh, here we go. 13 and a half. And then you've got what was the other side of that? So we said Ridley and London. So
Mhm.
London was 32 and a half. We got Ridley at 13. So that's like what, 45. And then Mahomes versus Burrow. You're
Chase,
looking at a
yeah.
couple of points. So it looks like the drop off, like going from 12 to 10, it's an even trade. I think Mahomes is kind of being undervalued right now just because if you look across the league, like there's not been a lot of passing touchdowns. I'm hesitant knowing with the Pacheco injury and that they don't really have anybody to service
Mm,
the ball. How else are they going to move the ball other than Mahomes throwing? If Burrow had more of a rushing upside, it would be more enticing to me, but I don't think that I necessarily like it as much. The one thing that I will say is
I
that
haven't seen Burrow with T Higgins yet though.
that's true, yeah, but we'll see what we got. So I would probably stand pat. If you are really high on Chase and Burrow, I'm not. I still actually have a lot of reservations about Burrow's ability to play with that wrist injury. I think it's going to linger throughout the year. But the smaller leagues that you have, when you can get those top end guys, even just looking at like the bench, it's like you already have CD, you already have DK. Um, Upgrading London to uh, Chase is pretty nice, and I don't really feel that confident in Ridley. Ridley does nothing for me personally, but
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean,
So
he's had I guess that's kind of that the person's probably If you're trading Ridley right now, you're probably trying to sell high, right? Because he has scored a good bit of fantasy points in the first 2 weeks, but like Will
Right.
Levis is his quarterback, and I don't think that's going to sustain.
Right.
So yeah, I'm with you on standing pat on this trade, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
But if you feel pretty confident, like I don't think it's a bad trade. It's just not a trade that I would like. But I'm just a random dude on the internet, so like do what you do. So I think value wise, like you're not giving up too much. I personally wouldn't like it at least this early in the season, but
I like the point about Mahomes though, with
yeah,
the structure of the offense. I will
yeah,
say that I don't know that teams are going to continue to defend them the same way though. They're still going to see a bunch of too high, and they
yeah,
want them to run the football. Whether or not Mahomes is able to take advantage of that, and maybe playing more underneath, maybe we do see Travis Kelce all of a sudden get more work than he has in the first 2 weeks. I don't know. Maybe it is just going to continue to be Rashee Rice on these slants and crossers, but yeah, I mean, you got to feel good about Mahomes figuring it out
sure.
regardless of what the defense game plans for.
Yeah, I
So
think there's been less than 70 touchdowns thrown this year, and it's like if
yeah,
you look
well,
back like a couple years ago,
that's the
it's
trend of the
usually in
league.
the hundreds. Yeah. Well, I
That's
think
not even like a
defenses,
fantasy football thing. Like every defense now is just playing a bunch of too high and
yeah, they're
telling
just like
teams to
you have
run
to
the
beat me
football.
by 1,000 cuts. They're not giving up the big play anymore, and it's just changing the way that things go.
Mhm.
So I think you had a lot of innovation. You also had so much better quarterback play, I would argue, at a high level 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
And now you don't see that as much. So it's gonna be interesting to see how it changes the landscape. You had so much talk of like zero RB. RB's kind of making a comeback. I don't know. We'll see.
yeah.
All right. Transitioning a little bit into the dynasty side of things. So 0-2, maybe a fringe playoff team. Are you going to sell your shares of Jordan Mason while it's at max value, or are you
Ooh.
going to let it ride?
Hmm. Man, do I love me some Jordan Mason.
And he's what, a free agent after this year? He'll be 26. Or maybe he's a free agent after next year.
Yeah, let me see.
Yeah. But I know that he'll be fairly young. I've seen some chatter about like that was somebody that Dallas should have looked at in the offseason. It's like, yeah,
Mm.
you're probably right. If it's me,
He's a
this
restricted free agent after the season.
okay. But do they have any money to pay him? Probably not. I would
Yeah.
be
I mean,
trading
they'll
him.
they'll probably offer an original tender on
Yeah.
him, put an original tender on him, and then trade him. Because I don't think that a team's going to. I mean, no team's going to sign him and give up a second round pick to San Francisco to do so. I wouldn't think. I mean, I guess a team might,
Yeah.
but I would think that would not be the case. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting
Yeah.
because
I'm all
he was or undrafted free agent out of Georgia
so
Tech.
then what's the
So
original tender? Does it just become like a seventh? I like
no, I mean it's the same thing as like I don't know what that wording is, to be honest with you. I have to look more into it. But it's like the same thing that the Steelers would do with Jalen Warren potentially
oh
after this
yeah.
year.
And they
It's a
probably
second round. Yeah, it's a second or third round pick.
yeah, you're basically it's not where they were drafted. It's basically here's the premium that we're being assigned if you're gonna take them off of us kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
think that value like determines the contract or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would say trade him. I think that especially if you're a fringe playoff team, running backs are always the last thing that I try to acquire from like a dynasty perspective, just because you have all the injuries and volatility year over year. His value is never going to be higher. If you can get someone to overpay, then that's a smash in the park for me. I wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah. I can't disagree.
Yeah.
As much as I love Jordan Mason, it's interesting because yeah, you don't know what's going to happen after this year. With like you're hoping he goes somewhere else,
And you
right?
don't even
I mean,
know the stuff with CMC is so weird. He could be sitting in the bench next week. I don't think so. I don't think CMC is going to play for a while. But
yeah,
you
yeah,
never they've been so coy about it that it's hard to know.
yeah. There's so many layers to that because on one hand, you probably want him to not be in San Francisco to be able to get away from CMC and be a lead back somewhere. At the same time, is he that dude out of San Francisco's system? Because we've seen what running backs look like in
Sure.
Shanahan's system
That's valid too.
that aren't that guy. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you have the right deal, I make it as well.
Yeah. Live from Pennsylvania Sheets, Drew Hannis, watcher of the show, co-host of the show. How you doing, King? All right.
Yeah.
I think this will be a pretty quick one. We haven't even got to injuries yet. So we'll probably jump on that here in a second, but I wanted to get to Chandler's question. Chandler, welcome to the show. Trade Purdy, Zamir White, Hill, Shakir for Watson, Achane, and Rice PPR. That's got to be Taysom Hill, right? But I just don't see. Like, I'm thinking Deshaun Watson, Achane, and Rice.
It kind of seems like they did it by position, right? So you got QB, running back. I would guess that's Taysom, because then
I
QB, running
mean,
back, receiver in the next one.
if that's not Tyreek, stop whatever you're doing right now and go and accept this trade. Like yesterday. I don't care what Brock Purdy is. I don't know how much Colts cash he has, but Achane and Rice for Zamir White and Shakir, like that
Yeah, the
is. Oh,
quarterbacks don't
he
matter
said it
much.
was Tyreek.
Oh, okay.
So that does make it more interesting.
Brother, you got to put Tyreek, not Hill. That got to be at the front of the trade.
Yeah. That's got to be the headliner for sure. I mean, that does make it more interesting with the Tua news. Do you think you think Tua plays? I mean, Rice to me is like potential.
Well, he's not going there for 4 weeks.
Achane, I think.
Achane could be the focal point of that offense now. That same offense that Tyreek is in.
And Achane proved, I know that there's the injury concerns, but he came in last week, carried the ball over 20 times. And even when they were out of the game and he probably shouldn't have been playing, they should have did it.
There's injury concerns, but there's also injury concerns with every other back that's on the team.
I think I'd go for it. I think I'd go for it if it was me. Like Shakir does not.
Did they say, is this redraft or
18-team redraft?
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not that worried about Tyreek's getting up there in age anyway, so I think Dynasty would be more of a conversation, but being that it's a redraft, I'm not worried about what Hill's going to be the rest of the year anyway, without Tua, at least for 4 weeks. And then I don't know, like at least for 4 weeks, I don't think it's gonna be that. I think it's gonna be much longer.
I would still take the trade personally. I think
no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm taking it because I want Achane and Rice over the rest of that.
Yeah. Going back to that spreadsheet, so they have Tyreek as a 63, Achane is at a 48, Rashee Rice is at a 44. Watson and Purdy, I don't really care about, but Zamir White is terrible. Shakir does nothing for me. So it's like, would I trade Hill for Achane and Rice? Yes, I would. So let's do it. Let's see here. We'll jump into some more of these here in a little bit, but let's talk injuries real quick. We'll throw on the lab coat and kind of get through this together.
We have time to go through all the injuries?
Yeah, feel free to comment like wherever you want, pretty much for the most part. But okay, so we'll kind of just hit this by position. We talked a couple about them a little bit. First one, Jordan Love was inactive last week. They marked him as a limited participant officially in practice. Somehow, despite everyone in the state of Indiana knowing that the Packers were going to run the ball last week, they still were able to find a way to win the game with Malik Willis not really doing a whole lot. Congratulations to him. I guess he was the better quarterback.
What was Gus Bradley doing? Like, what was the game plan for that defense?
Bro needed to run that like monster blitz like from Madden 94 just every time.
I mean, I know, and then they lost their best defensive player probably into DeForest Buckner. And that's obviously going to take a hit for the run defense. But like, even when he was in there, like there was, I don't know how that happens. What they end up running for? Close to 300?
Close to 300. Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. Like, I think Jacobs was getting up there for like most attempts like in a game in history. Like, it was unbelievable.
Jeez.
Yeah, and that was something. Next one in the quarterback room, obviously you touched on a little bit. Tua Tagovailoa, another apparent concussion. They put him on IR just to give him some time just to heal. We don't really know what the course of action is going to be. Been a lot of talk about him potentially hanging up the cleats. There's been a lot of kind of pushback from the team saying just like, hey, like that's not what's best for him. Just let him decide. A lot of different opinions. I don't really want to get into that because it's not my business. Ultimately, I hope he's able to make a good decision. They brought in Tyler Huntley from Baltimore's practice squad. They're talking about rolling with Skylar Thompson. Do you have any particular thoughts, feelings, whatever, about what this means for kind of the skill players in the Miami offense?
Well, I kind of alluded to the way that I feel about the pass catchers with my trade thoughts for wanting Achan over Tyreek Hill the rest of the way if I'm picking between one player in the Dolphins offense. Like Tyreek's still obviously going to be Tyreek in a real life perspective. He's going to be
Right.
open a ton. That speed's going to burn. I just don't think that Skylar Thompson, or if they end up choosing to go with Tyler Huntley down the road once he's acclimated, are going to be able to take advantage of it from a fantasy football perspective to make him that same guy. Like I don't think he's a wide receiver one the rest of the way with their
Sure.
quarterback play.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, Skylar Thompson, he's slanging a little bit in the times that he's been in, but I just think the consistency factor, I don't see a scenario where he's able to support both of those guys. I imagine that if this is going to hurt anybody the most, it's going to be Waddle. They'll find ways to manufacture touches for Hill just because he's so explosive and gives that big play. I like what you're saying about the H-hand news as well about, hey, like they're going to put this really in his hands to do what he can. But I think one of the things that was very interesting and intriguing about Tua is that he was able to get the ball out quick. He really was able to pepper both of those guys. And even last week, like Jonnu Smith, like had a pretty decent game from tight end's perspective. I don't see like Skylar Thompson being able to support both of those guys. So huge blow on that front.
Yeah. From a real life perspective, honestly, I feel like the Dolphins, with the history that Tua has, should have done more at the backup quarterback spot. And this isn't even like a fantasy discussion, but like just a real life thing. I feel like they kind of did a disservice to the entire position with having Skylar Thompson as their QB2.
Yeah, it's very surprising to me as well, especially when you had people like Flacco, the Jacoby Brissett's of the world that you could have had slot in there. Even someone like a Jameis Winston. I don't know. They definitely could.
Tyrod got 2 years and with the Jets behind Aaron. I mean, like, yeah, because I understand the argument for like Jacoby probably maybe wouldn't have taken that one because
Yeah.
he at least knew in New England he'd probably start right away, if not,
Right.
a significant portion. With those other spots, clearly he's going to be slotted in as a backup. But like, yeah, Flacco took a job knowing he was to be the backup. Tyrod took a job knowing he was to be the backup. So like these vets still were taking those jobs.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting, and it really just sets the framework for Buffalo basically just to waltz through that division. Like I don't see, even without the weapons in the wide receiver room, like who is going to compete with them. I don't see the Jets really doing a lot. I don't think that New England's going to be able to do enough. So where do we sit? We'll see. All right, moving on to the running back room. Biggest injury, which we're going to talk a little bit more about during the Tinder time. So we will kind of breeze through this one. Isaiah Pacheco, broken fibula, awkwardly bent backwards on just like a wrap-up tackle. 6 to 8 weeks, potentially longer. We're still waiting to see if he has surgery. CEH also sidelined, so some questions about what they're going to do. Kareem Hunt brought in and signed this week, going to be added to the roster. Another big one that's developing, Joe Mixon. He was picked up from behind on what we would call a hip drop tackle, or as what we call in America, a tackle. But he could potentially be out this week. He didn't look great after that. They tried to bring him back through. Looks like Pacheco did have surgery today, so that could be a pretty big blow. I don't know what that timeline looks like expanded with the surgery, but not going to be great. We'll see what happens. So thanks for the assist on that one, Chad. Always keeping it real in the comments. Last one that we're kind of still unsure about. Rachaad White left the game with a groin injury. He came back for a little bit, but still some questions as to what his availability is going to be like for this week. On the receiver front, feels like everybody and their mother got injured last week at the receiver position. Cooper Kupp looking like he has a high ankle sprain. There was some questions on if he was going to go to the IR, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be at least a couple of weeks, but that's just, it is what it is. A lot of questions about who becomes the next receiver in the Los Angeles Rams locker room. You have Demarcus Robinson, who at the tail end of last year really came on strong, had some really good performances. Tyler Johnson seemed to be the one that took over the steed there as well. You also have Tutu Atwell chilling. And then Whittington as well, that 6th-round rookie who kind of popped in the preseason. Zach, is there any of those guys that you think is kind of worth a pickup, or if I know waivers already cleared, but somebody that if they are available that you'd be running to go and snag?
I mean, I think Demarcus Robinson to me is probably the guy, and Stafford typically does pepper his number one targets with targets. So I think that he has a good bet to be fantasy viable. Uh, Tyler Johnson, I really liked when he was coming out of college, when he was with the Buccaneers. I thought he showed a lot of promise as a route runner at the very least. And it's funny because he was wearing number 18 there. He kind of looked like
Yeah,
Deontay Johnson, the way that he would move around in space. I know Drew's pretty high on Jordan Whittington as a flyer as well to carve out a role within this receiving room. Small dude though. And I just with what the Rams asked of their guys as blockers, that's kind of why I feel like Tutu Atwell hasn't emerged as like this big target for them. And
right.
he's always been a complimentary piece, is because they asked so much of their receivers in the blocking game too. I just wonder how much he's going to be able to get on the field, other
Yeah.
than just like a gadget play here or there.
Sure. No, yeah, that's definitely a good call out. We have a couple of less severe injuries here coming up. So both Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson had some sort of like soft tissue injury that knocked them out of games last week. Seems to be more of the contusion-based thing. Expecting to have those two back in the lineups this week. Doesn't look that serious, thankfully there. AJ Brown popped up.
Jordan Whittington's not the small receiver I was thinking of. He's 6'1", 202.
Yeah,
he could definitely run block.
You're probably thinking of Tyler Johnson then.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. They have Colby Parkinson. They signed to like a 3-year deal. They could utilize him as like more of a tight end role. But yeah, Stafford's going to be throwing the ball to somebody. So it'll be interesting to see. I would definitely at least take like a lottery shot at one of those Rams receivers because Puka's out for a while. Kupp's going to be out for a while. They're going to have to move the ball somehow. All right, so we got two more injuries, then we'll jump into kind of headlines. I don't think that there's really going to be a ton of headlines because most of them were injury related. A.J. Brown popped up late on the injury report last week with a hamstring injury. They're saying that it's going to be a couple of weeks. Jahan Dotson seemed like to be the person that will be benefiting most from that acquisition that they made and having this injury break, but it seemed like Devonta Smith just became the alpha for that offense. It seemed that they were just peppering him whenever they could. Saquon obviously had some opportunities there that he wasn't able to capitalize on. Goddard had himself like a decent evening. I wouldn't be running out to get Dotson. So he did get more of a snap share, but nothing else really to see there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say surprising because I don't necessarily think very highly of Jahan Dotson as a player, but just to play 53 snaps or whatever it was and have one reception, I mean, that's doing a lot of cardio. So I really thought that Dallas Goedert was going to be the guy. What did he end up having in that game?
Let me look here. So
3 for 38. So
yeah. He only had 4 targets. Devonta had 10. Britton Covey had 6 targets out of nowhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that on Twitter.
Yeah, and then Saquon Barkley had 5. Somebody that I would be really interested in is, does this do anything for Johnny Wilson? He was somebody that they talked about a lot in preseason. They thought he was going to be the wide receiver 3, had a concussion early on, just didn't get the reps. I wonder if that performance that they had is going to maybe get him on the get him on the field a little bit more. So,
I mean, he's huge. He can run block for sure. I don't know. That's interesting. I wonder too if he's the type of guy that ultimately is going to transition to tight end. Like that, he has more of that body type. Sure. I don't think that they'll do it right away. I think you got to give him a shot to stick at receiver. I don't know. I wasn't that impressed with watching him. Like the reason that I watched him anyway, like Keon Coleman obviously going to the same school at Florida State, kind of jumped off the page. Johnny Wilson's just a big bodied dude. I don't know how much, his variance there is to his game, but I mean, hey, it's a dart throw. If Jahan Dotson's giving you nothing with playing 50+ snaps,
sure,
gotta go somewhere else.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so we had one injury kind of just break rather recently. Compliments probably of Rappaport, but mostly from Chad, saying that CeeDee Lamb did not practice with the ankle designation today. I'm going to chalk that up as a veteran rest day, but I have no idea he could actually hurt. We'll see.
I guess that's the one thing about doing these on Wednesday, right? Like Wednesday's the day if anybody's dealing with really anything, they're going to be limited or not practice.
Right. Yeah.
So
we'll see.
Yeah.
One last injury that we're going to touch on. I know that there were a couple others, but Evan Ingram, right pretty much at the deadline of games on Sunday, surprised inactive, pulled a hamstring during warmups. So he's had that injury kind of designation before. Hopefully this isn't something that's going to creep up to him again, but listed as week to week. So he may be sidelined for a bit longer. Second round pick, Brenton Strange, had 3 passes caught, 6 targets, 65 yards. I think this says 2 things to me, Zach. One, there was a lot of concern. Evan Ingram didn't really have a good first week of the season. People are like, oh, like, is he being phased out of the offense? Is it going to be different this year? What's going on? If you're targeting Brenton Strange 6 times and you have Gabe Davis, you have Brian Thomas, you have Christian Kirk still at your disposal, and you're hitting the target, you're targeting the tight end that's the backup, a surprise like starter 6 times. I feel very good about having Evan Ingram on IR spot, ready to come back. I actually had someone in a league drop him, so I like scurried and picked him up. I was just like, make it rain with some fab. I think I was the only one that bid on him, but whatever. Never get that $50 back. But yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Dude, Bretton Strange almost like I don't know that people realize how close he was to coming down with that ball on that Hail Mary again the Jaguars had. I think Bretton Strange is a good player. But yeah, I mean it's a pretty crowded offense with targets. Like you though, I mean Evan Ingram with how much chemistry it looked like he had with T-Law last year. I mean, the amount of targets what was it, like 130 something targets?
Yeah, he was up there for sure. I think it was like 136.
And I understand there's just so many moving pieces, right? Like Calvin Ridley out, Gabe Davis in, they draft Brian Thomas Jr. in the first round. So how's it all going to shake out? But I just don't think you go away from that familiarity. Like that is not where I would be thinking that there's going to be some switch up is with Evan Ingram's work.
And I think to your point earlier when we were talking about Mahomes, the 2 high looks, the middle of the field is where you want to attack that kind of stuff. So it's like your slot receivers, which Christian Kirk, one of the best in the league as a slot guy. Mm-hmm. Ingram is effectively another dude in the slot. So you're putting him on a linebacker. That's a pretty tough matchup to have. So for me, I think when he does come back, then it's going to be good. We'll see. I don't think he plays this week. If he is, he's not probably somebody that I would throw into my lineup, but definitely wouldn't be like a cut candidate, anything like that.
To that point, though, Bretton Strange, I think, interesting flyer for a little bit while Evan Ingram's out.
And would definitely be something that is like great for DFS because I know Drew talks about this all the time. It's always a week behind. So if he is getting that start, you're basically getting him at what his cost was last week, which going into the week, he's going to be basically free. So I don't know what their matchup is this week. The Jags have, let's see, what's the
they're
Bills
on Monday night. Yeah, I'd say they're on Monday
night. The Bills have been the 6th worst team against tight ends. Not really a lot, only 12 points a game, but tight ends just in general. I mean, we have 20 teams in the league almost that are keeping under 10 points per game in PPR so far. It's pretty absurd. All right, so before we get into any other headlines for the week, there were a couple of questions that I wanted to jump back to. So we got Tim J here. Hey guys, should I drop Corum for Braylon Allen? Also, should I trade Brian Robinson for Chris Olave? So let's start with the second one first. I'm trying to think about how I feel about this. To me, it's an easy yes. I know that Chris Olave.
I mean, I'd say, to a degree, you would be curious about what the rest of the team looks like, running backs and wide receivers wise. But like on the surface, 1 for 1.
Yeah, 1 for 1. I mean, I realize that Olave hasn't really had the shine. We've seen a lot of big plays from Rashid Shaheed, and that offense has been, by all means, blowing everyone out of the water. Kamara he had the hat trick last week. They scored pretty much like on every drive the first game. I didn't know that Carr had that in his bag. Like the fact that
here's the thing. I feel like 2 things are going to meet here with the New Orleans Saints. The offense as a whole is due for some negative regression, but Olave himself is due for positive regression.
I would agree with that. No, I think that's valid. I am not very much in on the Derek Carr experience.
I mean, I believe in Clint Kubiak. Like, I think that offense is going to be fine.
Kubiak, yes.
This is ridiculous what they're doing right now.
Yeah. So enjoy the ride. I think that, Brian Robinson, he's been solid, but I definitely think that I would rather have Chris Olave in that 1 for 1. Braylon Allen for Corum. One and the same to me. I don't know. I don't really have any other.
Braylon Allen's probably going to catch more balls, right?
That's sure. Yeah. And like I think that you drafted Corum with the expectation that he was going to spell more early, but I don't think that you draft him with that capital and he doesn't have any tread throughout the year. So I think it's a little bit premature to make that move, but we'll see where we land. We'll see. All right. So I don't really want to do We'll show the graphic just because we made it. But as far as headlines, I want to keep this one pretty brief just because so much of it was wrapped up in the injuries. Zach, one of the things that I did want to talk about a little bit was just kind of like the QB carousel that's already started a little bit in the league. So we saw Bryce Young get the Pine Pony treatment after 20 games in Carolina. We're seeing a couple other moves, mostly injury related. But do you have any fears in particular? Somebody that you brought up before, something that I thought was interesting at the end of last week. So Will Levis has had maybe some of the most insane, I don't know if turnover luck is the right way to describe it, but he's had back-to-back weeks where it's like, did you hit the wrong button? Did your controller unplug? Like, how did we get here? Do you foresee a scenario where Mason Rudolph takes over for Levis, or do you think that his job is relatively safe and that their coach is just a bit more animated? Because he was pretty much like, "You're an adult. Why are you making these stupid decisions?
Right.
Like, what is wrong with you?"
Yeah, Brian Callahan. And by the way, I actually kind of like that. I think that that's a good way of sending messaging. Is doing it through the media, because I'm sure. I mean, he had a conversation with himself, I'm sure, as well. But
It'd be
also,
hilarious if he didn't, though.
yeah, I mean, that's true. I guess I shouldn't assume that did happen. And in that case, I'm not sure that I do love it, but I don't foresee that happening right now. I think if something like this were to happen later in the season, potentially, I just think like they really have to find out what they have in Levis. I think he had some
Yeah,
moments last year. I'm not super high on him as a player to begin with. But I think that if you start to see yourself actually, I'm kind of talking myself out of it, because I think that the case for continuing to play him despite the struggles would be you're already out of it, but maybe they feel like if making the switch, they wouldn't be out of it. But I mean, with a low upside, high floor guy like Mason Rudolph as the backup, I don't know that that's a worthwhile move to make anyway. I ultimately, though, think that we're going down a path where I don't think that Will Levis is the answer. Brian Callahan was not there when they drafted him. I'm not one for one comparing it to Carolina, but I
right.
don't think it's like, because I don't think it's going to happen this early in the season. I could see it happening later in the season or after the season where they pull the plug on this thing. But
Sure.
for the time being, I think Levis stays in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel like the AFC South, I mean, you do have Houston there, but other than that, there's a lot of weak teams. So it'll be interesting to see like how long is that leash. I want to be contradictory a little bit just because I had someone ask in one of our dynasty leagues before the year if I would trade him for a first round pick. And I was like, but now I think that he's the greatest quarterback of all time, and I would definitely revisit that trade and regretfully make it. So we'll see where we land. One other one that I had for you, we had two running backs had really big weeks last week, 3 touchdowns apiece. We had James Cook from Buffalo on the Thursday night game, and then you had Alvin Kamara on Sunday. Do you think that these guys have kind of had their best game of the year? Or do you think that the performance they've had the first 2 weeks of the season is sustainable?
I mean, I said I kind of see regression coming for the Saints offense as a whole anyway. I mean, Kamara's not going to continue to do what he's doing, having 6 touchdowns
Sure.
in a 2-game stretch.
Yeah.
In the case of James Cook, I don't know that he's going to score, what was it, like 28 or something. I mean,
Yeah.
every single week, or if
Right.
he'll reach that again. But he has been very good since Joe Brady took over as the OC. I think that he is an integral
Yeah.
part of that offense that kind of has gotten lost in the shuffle. But I don't think it's going to continue to happen. I think, like on a national stage, we saw how much of a focal point he is for that offense, and I think a lot of that is with the turnover that they've had with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis leaving town, and still trying to figure out who is who in that receiving room and who the number one targets are going to be. I think a lot of that offense is going to go through James Cook.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about James Cook this year relative to previous years is if you look at rushes inside like the red zone, traditionally all of that is going to Josh Allen.
Right.
This year, it feels like he's getting more of that goal line work. They both have 4 carries right now inside the 20, but Josh Allen doesn't have any carries inside the 5.
Wow.
So he's kind of been in some scramble drills, like in goal line, or not like in goal line situations, but in just kind of in red zone opportunities. Whereas James Cook's already touched the ball twice inside the 5. If you're getting the ball inside the 5, you're probably gonna have some good weeks. So to me, it's like that is shocking. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because they're so worried that if they lose Allen, they finally figured out that that would be bad for their team. But we'll
I
see.
really I like Joe Brady a lot. I think that he
Yeah.
has emphasize James. I think James Cook's a really good player. I
Sure.
think that a
Yeah.
lot of people were kind of blind to that because of kind of the way that things were going with the previous regime. But I
Right.
think getting Joe Brady, handing him the keys to that offense has really highlighted how good of a player he is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Kamara, like that offense is perfect for him. So it's like, yeah, I mean, he may
Sure.
not score, but
I
he is
mean,
crushing.
what the last couple of years though, we kind of thought he was on the downswing. And I'm not maybe
Right.
this is a 2 week outlier, I don't know. But to your point, this does seem like the type of offense that can at least take the tread off the tires at a lower rate.
Sure. And there's really no competition there to replace him. So we'll see. Yeah, I
Right.
think obviously some regression, but I think he should have been drafted way higher than he was. Kind of gives me vibes to like Mike Evans last year. We're like, oh, like he's kind of old. I don't think he's got it. And then it's like, oh yeah, I'm that bitch. So
I mean, I understand the how everybody felt about Kamara, but like, man, if you're somebody that like actually pays attention to the league, not just from a fantasy football perspective, and you see them get Clint Kubiak in there and see what regime he's coming from and the way that the type of offenses that he runs, like you had to know that Kamara was going to be a pretty massive piece of that. So
oh, for sure.
yeah, I think a lot of people maybe had their blinders on to what reality was as opposed to
Yeah,
fantasy.
overthought it a little bit for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel that. All right, well, you know what time it is, people. It's time for fantasy football Tinder. So let's get the faces where they need to be. Let's do this dance. Typically, we start fantasy football Tinder by explaining what it is. So we'll walk through that. If you are not on Tinder, if you don't have a cell phone, if you don't like to meet people that you are interested in touching butts with, Tinder is a way to do that. Or just to connect with people. We do it a little bit differently here at the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. So for the purposes of today, we are going to be swiping right, which means that we like what's going on, or swiping left. I guess it's different on the camera, but whatever. So things that we don't really like. So
That's
for
true.
example, our model for today is Dr. Drew. So is Dr. Drew enjoying his bye week this week? For everybody knows that he probably was smacking hard on some sheets. Probably like, yeah, he's loving it, time of his life. Yeah, of course, we're going to swipe right. You'll see that with the green hearts on the screen. For everybody that knows, Drew is lurking in the comments, crying to himself, and probably going to have a show on the side with future Steeler Noah Hannis. Probably going to swipe no and be like, yeah, like he wishes he was here, as he should. So one of the topics that we had talked about kind of like leading into this Tinder was Braylon Allen. So had a pretty nice week out of really nowhere this past week. So first week one, played like 8 snaps, nothing really happened. Comes out of the gate, week 2, doubles, almost triples his snap count, 2 touchdowns. Zach, are you all in on Braylon Allen?
No. No. I mean, I got to see it for a longer period of time. Braylon Allen, by the way, youngest player in the NFL, doesn't turn 21 until next spring.
That's
So
crazy.
there's just a little interesting tidbit for you. But I mean, it's nice to see. I think that you could do worse if you're trying to like stash a player. You got like really deep rosters or something like that. I don't see him being an every week focal point of this offense. And even if I did, with Nathaniel Hackett running the show, I'm not sure that there's like more than 2 guys that I trust to produce within that offense. And that's already going to be Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson for me, obviously. So no, as at this time, I'm sorry, Braylon Allen, swipe left.
Yeah, I think I'm also on the swipe left of the Braylon Allen train as somebody that I would put into lineups. I think what's interesting about this Jets team, even with so long as Aaron Rodgers is on the field, I think that they're going to have a serviceable pass catching back on that team. We saw Alan Lazard have a really big week 1. Mike Williams start to come on a little bit more last week as the wide receiver 2. They actually moved Alan Lazard into the slot, interestingly enough, and then we're kicking Mike Williams onto the outside. Xavier Gibson was the one that was mostly impacted by his return. He led the team in snaps in week 1 and then kind of didn't do a whole lot of anything. I do think it's interesting that they have like more of a split between Hall and Allen that they do. I think if you think back to like the beginning of draft season, it was like, hey, Hall doesn't really have any competition. He's going to get all of this work. He's going to get all of the targets, do all of this. That's why I'm picking him over Bijan, because Bijan has a clear-cut handcuff in Tyler Algier. I think from what we've seen in this performance, I'm not worried about Breece Hall from like, oh, like, is he getting into a timeshare, this and that. This is really just to keep him fresh, still touch the ball 20 sometimes. I think that Braylon Allen is ascending in the ranks as like a handcuff. So is he someone I would roster? Yes. Would I put him in a lineup week to week? Probably not, unless Brees Hall has some sort of injury. I'm really shocked, though. I was really honestly surprised that they drafted him. I thought that they were going to have Izzy come in and be the backup this year. I saw
Right. Yeah.
that, like, especially because he had a pretty strong preseason, but they're really high on Braylon Allen. I think that he'll continue to run the routes, but I mean, it's going to be hit or miss. You're really banking on that touchdown, not something that I'd want to roll with.
Right. I mean, he jumped from 2 touches to 9. So
Yeah.
like, who knows what that variance? I mean, like it's again, if we'll see what week 3 goes. If it
Yeah.
stays the same or continues to increase, I think there's some intrigue there. But who's to say it doesn't go back down? Like, I mean, it could have just been
Right.
a 1 week thing.
Yeah, it could have just been like a game thing. Yeah, for sure. All right, so we touched a little bit about this earlier in the show, but Bryce Young taking the seat, Andy Dalton coming in. We've seen Andy Dalton work a little bit of magic from a fantasy perspective in years past. The Red Rocket fighting Father Time. We've already heard some news about Deontay Johnson being asked about in trades. He's got 1 year left on his deal. My only fantasy for the year has done jack shit so far this season. But now that Young is gone, are we out of the Young and the Restless situation for Deontay?
I like this, to be honest, for Deontay Johnson. So I'm swiping right. Andy Dalton had to play 1 game last year. He had like 58 passing attempts, threw for like 350 yards in that game. He's going to go out there and sling it. There's no doubt about it. What's he have to lose? I mean, at this point, when they get turned back to Bryce, so I think that he's going to go. He's going to let it loose. You have one receiver on that roster that you know is going to always be open at all 3 levels of the field. I think that honestly, it's crazy to say, but this has the best chance of unlocking a big play ability from Deontay Johnson that he hasn't had his entire career.
True. Yeah. I mean, even if you think back to like those final years of Ben, like it was very much like
Right.
you're going to run an out route. Have fun. Will he know what direction that he's going to run in? Who's to say? But I mean, if you look at the stats so far, 2 games played, 12 targets, 5 receptions, 34 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Not really great. I'm trying to look real quick here, like what his openness score has been. His separation has been like 1.58 yards, which really isn't that great. But if you look at, say, like his expected fantasy points per game, based on his routes, based on his like utilization, they're expecting to be 35th in the league right now. But they're expecting 12.4 points per game from him. He's been averaging 4. So definitely a big spike there. I'm also on the Deontay train. I have a lot of faith in Cardinals. I think that they do figure it out. I don't know if it was necessarily Bryce Young in its entirety. That offensive line has looked absolutely horrendous. But I do think from like an ability to get through reads and progress through reads, lock in on a guy and basically just feed him the ball as much as you can, I think that Andy Dalton can't provide that. And so with that, I think I'm hesitant on throwing Deontay Johnson into a lineup this week, but I feel like he's probably a good buy low candidate if you can get a hold of him for cheap, or people might have already dropped him already. Who's to say? So I can't say that I'm going to give up on it quite yet.
Last year, ESPN receiver score. So this is based on openness, catch, yak, everything kind of put together. Deontay Johnson was 7th in the entire NFL.
Yeah. And I don't think that ESPN, I don't think they released their scores like going into this year, because I was looking, I think until after this week.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be curious.
Again, I know that that's interesting. You mentioned the separation being down a little bit, but like the body of work to me is still going to outweigh the first 2 weeks, unless this continues to be a prolonged thing. Then maybe it is just like he's not the youngest dude anymore. As crazy as that is to say, he came in as an older player. He was like a 24-year-old rookie. So he is what, like 29 now, 28, 29.
28,
so yeah. So
cool.
We'll see.
All right. So moving on to Tinder 3. So we've got a little bit of swipe left action. We got a little bit of swipe right action. See what we got for this third and final one here. So with the Isaiah Pacheco injury, we know that he's going to be out for a good chunk of time. Dr. Drew actually said in the comments a little bit earlier that the surgery, it's not so much the surgery of like repairing the leg, but if there was any ligament damage as a result of the break, that's when that's going to get uncovered. But we'll see kind of what happens with that. So the question now is, what is next? We have a couple of different running backs that we don't really know a lot about. So we got Carson Steele friend of the alligator community. We've got Samaje Perine, who was signed pretty much from a cut from the Broncos a couple of weeks ago. CEH on IR. Kareem Hunt's coming in, currently on the practice squad. Zach, do you feel that the hunt is over with Kareem Hunt being signed? Do you feel that he could slide in eventually into your lineups once he gets up to game speed with what we're seeing here?
I'm swiping left on this for right now. I mean, even at his age, like even if he had been there, he'd probably be a guy that I would think would be on the decline. Now you're talking about him going back in there. I know there's got to be some familiarity with the organization. But I mean, it's not like he was playing in a Matt Nagy offense, even when he was there prior. So I think there's going to be something there in terms of catching him up to speed. I don't know. I'm out on Kareem Hunt being a viable fantasy option at this point in his career, and just all of a sudden having to jump on a moving train as well.
Yeah, I feel a little bit more optimistic about Hunt. So I'm going to swipe right on this one. I have been going back and forth about, like, when I was thinking about waiver claims last night before I went to sleep, it was like, all right, like Carson still immediately has like that opportunity to kind of seize the role as the lead back. And then I was like, then they brought in Perine. Why wouldn't have they brought in Hunt like when they could have in the offseason? He was sitting there. Could you have got him for cheap? Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to see like why they didn't want to. I think part of it is it's like you cut this dude for like character issues in the past. Like it's kind of a weird one to unwind and walk back. So I think you have that there for you. I think too, like I do think that Kareem Hunt wanted to kind of have that opportunity to lead back role. I'm surprised that he didn't like land somewhere almost like how Dalvin Cook did with the Cowboys. There was a lot of kind of murky situations, but I do think from what we've seen from him, he hasn't really been all that great, but he's definitely serviceable. He's one of those guys that can play all three downs. He has some receiving capabilities. He can run between the tackles. Even the Browns would use him in the goal line a lot when he was with them. So I think that like he's going to get up to speed. I think for the Chiefs, it was like, we have a lot of faith in Pacheco. You're obviously not planning for injuries. Perine basically took over the McKinnon role. And then I don't envision you sign Kareem Hunt to be more of a special teams guy. I don't think Steele, is he really a special teams player? I'm not really sure at all, but I don't think that
seems like he would be, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really buying into it all too much. So I don't think that he's somebody that sees the lineups for me like right away or in the near future, but I do think that he could be a potential option. He, to me, offers the most upside out of the three players that are there right now.
Here's what I'll say. Is the surface level numbers, not that they were like, I know last year he still had like 9 rushing touchdowns or something for Cleveland. The rushing success rate has gone down for him every year now since 2019, 53.5%. Ever since then, every year it's gone down at least some percentage. Last year was his lowest since his rookie year, actually, at 45.9%. So I don't know. I mean, this is probably the best situation for him to go into. To be honest with you, I mentioned how I just feel like they got to find a way through the passing game. So if there's a back, like I've always been a fan of Samaje Perine and what he can do as a receiving back. Yeah. I don't know. Like that is probably where, if I had to put my eggs in a running back basket for Kansas City, that's probably the one I'd lean.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to be a lot of guessing, but I think that Andy Reid, especially, he's just so good at whatever he has available to him, he's going to use. I could even see, not necessarily that they would use him as a running back, but like, will they try to find ways for maybe like Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy, like just like with like a lot of like pop passes and just like kind of like sweeps or something to just like we're running the ball, but not kind of thing. I don't know.
Hey, maybe that's the role to finally get Sky Moore in, have him play in the backfield.
I mean, he does have a running back number, so anything's possible. Yeah. We'll see. All right. So before we jump into OnlyFantasy for the week, we did have a couple of questions that came up through the chat. So first one we're going to hit you with. So Hunter Henry, everybody's favorite tight end ad this week, but Pop Douglas, they were talking about wanting to get him involved. Do you think that happens at Henry's expense? I could start. I don't think so. Jacoby Brissett loves tight ends. Hunter Henry is running more routes pretty much than any tight end in the league right now and is, I think, second in targets for all tight ends. I think that continues to happen. I think that Brissett's playing well enough that they're going to continue to ride him. I don't see a scenario where I thought May was going to come in pretty fast. I don't think that's going to happen, especially the way that we've seen rookie quarterbacks perform. I think that Jared Mayo really would prefer to have him sit, learn, become a professional, and come in when you have to, especially when they have a strong defense. They're going to lean on Ramondre. And then I think Henry really is going to be the number one target. I think that it's really going to impact Baker, Polk, those kind of guys more so than anything else.
Yeah, it's surprising. Like Douglas, only 2 receptions for 12 yards this year on 3 targets. He was a guy that was gaining a bunch of steam, like in the preseason and stuff like that. As a guy that was going to be a big contributor for the Patriots. I agree, though, that I don't think it impacts Hunter Henry as much as, to be honest, out of the 2 that you said, I probably lean Javon Baker being the one that would take a back seat.
And he hasn't honestly really been involved at all anyway.
Yeah. So. If Douglas were to all of a sudden be, heavily involved in this offense, I would say that's, a trio, if you will, between Hunter Henry, him, and Jalen Polk.
Looks good to me. I like that. All right, so we got a trade from Twitch. So Mr. Vengeance.
Twitch, huh?
Yeah, man, we're big time out here. Would you trade CeeDee Lamb and Austin Eckler for Jonathan Taylor and Nico Collins? And my gut reaction was that was going to be a no for me, but I'm honestly surprised with how well Nico has maintained his alpha role in that offense.
I mean,
I'm really
that kind of goes back to the thing with like the hope with Evan Ingram, right? Is like he developed such good chemistry already with CJ Stroud, Nico Collins has, that you just feel like regardless of the moving pieces around him, Stroud's not going to go away from that guy. Yeah, they added Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins is still the guy. Yeah, they're getting Tank Dell back from injury. Nico Collins is still the guy. Like, I think that's he's already CJ's number 1. I don't see that changing regardless of what changes around it. So I think Lamb's the best player here, obviously, but I feel like Taylor and Collins might make up the difference and have that much of a gap with that.
I think, yeah. I mean, looking at the chart, so CeeDee Lamb,
and also we don't know, is this redraft or dynasty?
I would have to assume redraft.
Okay.
So CeeDee Lamb sitting at a 68, and then you've got Austin Eckler at 6.5, and that was with Austin Eckler having a good game last week. We've got Nico Collins sitting at 55, Jonathan Taylor sitting at 53. So this is getting blown out of the water in the trade. I typically hate giving up the best player in a trade. This is probably a situation where I would actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I said I think those 2 together make up the gap for me.
Yeah.
With Lamb being the best player.
Who would have thought? All right. Some more questions we got. This is Brad. Brad, welcome to the show. Would you trade Ford, Chubb, and Devontae Smith for Jonathan Taylor, DJ Moore, Tank Dell? Assuming that this is really any situation, Nick Chubb means nothing to me. He's not playing this year, I don't think. Jerome Ford, he's a Jag. Don't really care about him. Would I trade Devontae Smith, who's going to be a wide receiver 2 in 2 weeks, for Jonathan Taylor, DJ Moore, and Tank Dell? Yes.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I'm not trying to slight Brad here, but this is, to me, not much of a question.
But I'm glad for you. That's cool.
Yeah,
like, that's absolutely awesome. Like, live your life. I would think about it for a second just to make.
But the thing is, right? Even if Chubb does come back, we don't know how effective he's going to be, and that would make Ford irrelevant.
You're vulturing between the 2 of them, yeah. And DJ Moore, I mean, Chicago struggled a little bit. Caleb hasn't been at his best, but I still like that. I would consider doing just Jonathan Taylor for Ford, Chubb, and Devonta Smith. So you're getting 2 extra guys for that. Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We talked about this one a little bit before. Mahomes or Burrow rest of the season. I know that there's been a lot of talk. Chad actually mentioned this in the comments earlier about how Mahomes has had 6 QB 12 or better weeks in 13 months, and none of them are top 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that the game is being played right now, you can't draft quarterbacks that, unless you're in 6-point passing TD, which that changes it. But if you're in 4-point passing TD and you draft a quarterback that can't run, you're not going to have a good time, because all it takes is someone rushing for 80 yards, and that's 2 touchdowns that Mahomes has to throw. between those two, give me Mahomes.
I agree.
I don't feel strongly about it. I would probably have them like neither one is a top 5 quarterback to me this year. I think that Mahomes will probably finish like in a top 8, 7, 8. I think Burrow is like in the 8 to 10 range, but that's just me. Here's the Brad flex. So this is if the trade went through, team would be Lamar, Saquon, JT, Amon-Ra, DJ Moore, Brock Bowers with a mix of Waddle, Amari Cooper, Brian Thomas, and Zamir White. Because I helped you with this trade, if you would like to give me any of the winnings from the league.
And also, like, did he really have to throw Zamir White's name at the end of that? That's like the meme with the clown with all the guys that are in the military.
What? Oh yeah. I don't know. All right, we got one last little roster flex. I think this ends up being a trade question from Jonathan. Welcome to the show. So I got Brees, Mason, Monty, Braylon, Allen, P. Ryan, Pacheco, Amari, Rice, Higgins, Cup, Whittington, Quinn, Johnston, Kelsey, Henry. I'm in a 10-10 PPR. What kind of trade should I make for a wide receiver? So you got Amari, Rice, Higgins, Cup. I mean, yeah, you're kind of banged up there, but I think Higgins is going to make a return soon. Amari Cooper, he's somebody that I was pretty high on in the preseason. I think that he does find it. He's had quite a few drops so far on some big play opportunities that have been like right in the breadbasket that he just hasn't been able to come down with. I think if you are going to make a move here, I wonder. So the person that he was thinking about aiming for was Tank Dell. If I'm looking at like the Tank Dell value right now, you might be able to swing like Montgomery for it. I'm not crazy about the move just because you immediately have no depth. And we don't really know what's going to go on with Pacheco. So I don't feel great about going on the kind of like the running back side. I wonder if you have Henry, maybe that's a sell high for me. And then you can say, hey, like I've got Hunter Henry, he's got all these targets. I don't think that I could quit Kelsey just yet in the season, even though it's been kind of like a slow start. I think he had 1 point last week. But yeah, I think maybe you can try to use like Henry and then maybe like one of the injured guys, or like maybe you say, hey, like I don't feel great about Amari Cooper. You want to do a 1-for-1, and then I'll take on what's it called? Tank Dell. It'd be a fair trade. I don't know if it really moves the needle for you. Or if you can kind of put maybe someone's really jazzed up about like Whittington or somebody that's taking over for the Rams and they need a win. We'll see. But yeah, it's kind of hard. I think I would hold pat. Cup avoiding IR is big for you. I know that you're hurting without Higgins. But I think that you have like a lot of good bones in this team. And if I'm trading, I would rather take 2 of those guys and get like a really good player. Going for Tank Dell to me is a bit of a lateral move.
I don't have much to add to that, to be honest with you.
All right. Another trade question from Mitch on YouTube. Welcome to the show. Would you trade away CD and Achane to receive Bijan and Rice? Half PPR, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 flex. That is a nasty trade. Like that one like breaks my brain because there's just a lot happening.
Yeah, it's just 4 good players.
Yeah. I think CD and Achane just a little bit better for me. I think back to where we're at here. I was a bit lower on Achane and consensus just because of the injury fears, but he's holding up so far. And what we talked about earlier was, hey, with this injury, they're going to have to funnel the ball through dump offs, through the running backs. Mostert's still banged up. Jeff Wilson didn't do anything last week, so he's really the guy right now. I'm also surprised, name's escaping me right now. I'm sure that you can name it. Rookie running back that they got this year, 4th round guy.
Jalen Wright.
I was expecting kind of like a breakout week for him last week. Nothing. So it's really the Achane show. I love Bijan. I think Bijan has a clear path to running back 1 this year. I think him, Saquon, and Brees kind of have that spot kind of going. But yeah, I don't know. CD, like he's going to be that guy. It's taken a little bit longer, I think, without the reps of preseason. So I think he's going to come to form a little bit more. But yeah, I think it's a fair trade. I probably stick with the CD Achane side, but I can't really argue with if you wanted to go the other direction on
it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's keep it rolling. So, just traded Jordan Mason and Shaheed for Garrett Wilson. Thoughts? I like it.
Yeah, I mean, Shaheed's a big play waiting to happen. Obviously, what's he average, like 18 yards per reception or
At
something
least,
like
yeah.
that in
And
his
his
career?
reception
Yeah,
profile is like pretty nasty too.
yeah. But I think that he's still like he doesn't get the amount of touches, and I don't think that he will. I think it's more so. I don't want to say touchdown dependent, but I think there's certainly an element of that to his game. Jordan Mason, you just don't know how long you got him for. Like,
Sure.
so I like getting Garrett Wilson in that trade for sure.
Yeah, I think he'll grow as the season goes as well. So I think it's a sell high on two guys for kind of a stud there. I like it a lot. All right. We'll keep it rolling on Twitch. Adam, welcome to the show. Do I trade Palmer, Odunze, and Jamar Chase for Diggs, Devontae Adams, and Olave? I'm assuming that this is redraft.
Yeah,
I would say
yes.
yeah, for sure. Losing Chase, obviously a little bit of a slam there, but yeah, I think that let's see. So if you need the depth, I would be curious because to me, Palmer and Odunze don't really do anything for me. So it's like you're Jamar chasing it really for those three. Diggs, Olave, and then Adams. They're all kind of in that 20 to 25 range. They're all grouped in this sheet, like pretty much right next to each other. They slightly outweigh Jamar Chase just by like a smidge. So Jamar Chase is sitting at a 55 here. But if I look at those other guys in your list, Palmer, I don't even think makes the list. Rome is a 4. So it's like, yeah, I think it's definitely an upgrade. If you're looking for depth, that's a great way to do it. So why not?
Yeah.
All right. This is an interesting one. And then we'll get into OnlyFantasy for the week. Zach, do we rate parlays?
No.
All right. Well, I'll rate anything you want. Throw it at me. Send me a
Is that
picture.
the same thing as swiping left or right? To
Yeah,
be
I
honest,
guess.
I haven't sports bet in like 2 years.
Yeah, we don't sports bet in Ohio. But I'll tell you if I think it's crazy. Screw it. Let's go. Says Brees over 4.5 receptions, Rashee Rice over 66.5 yards, Collins over 74.5 yards, J.K. Dobbins over 58.5 rushing yards. The part that scares me the most, honestly, is Dobbins over 58.5. The Steelers shut down Bijan last week. J.K. Dobbins is only getting 12 to 13 carries a game. I don't think he hits that. So that to me is going to be the biggest question mark for the week on that one. The rest of it could very well see happening. I don't know how many receptions Brees has had on a week-to-week basis, but from a target perspective, he could definitely do it.
Yeah. I think the same. I think the one thing I have a reservation about is probably JK. Let me look at Brees here, though. He's had 8 targets and 6. He's turned them into 7 receptions and 5. So, yeah, that's a good number.
Yeah, so I think the Dobbins one I'd probably drop. Steelers so far, if we just look at, let me just pull up here a little bit on the lab. So defensive rushing stats by team. So the Steelers, let's see here, giving up like 3.7 yards per carry so far. So just knowing that he's only getting maybe 10 touches, 58 is going to be aggressive. He's going to need to break one to do it. I don't know if it's going to happen. He obviously could. He's been electric so far, but I mean, that's why you bet, right? If it was easy, then everybody would make the same. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's transition, get the show wrapped up. We're already over an hour, sitting at 67 people on the show, which is pretty sick. I don't know why y'all listen to me talk. Probably showstopper from Zach. Maybe people don't like Drew. I don't really know. But all that to say, we're thankful for being here. I remember last year there were times where there was literally like 0 people on the stream, and it was like, why do I do this to myself every week? So super fun. All right, so last segment of the day before we get on with our merry way. OnlyFantasy. Every week we're picking one guy that we think is going to have a really solid performance. Before we can get into the present, we have to take a moment to soak in the past. Zach, this obviously wasn't your pick, but you get to celebrate on behalf of Drew because last week he picked Malik Neighbors, eggplant emoji. To quote Drew Hannis, he said simply, I'm back. 10 receptions, 127 yards, 1 touchdown on 18 targets, wide receiver 3 for the week. I have another hit, so I'm 2 for 2 on the year. Chris Godwin, 7 receptions, 117 yards, 1 touchdown, wide receiver 6. Whoever is the slot receiver against the Detroit Lions, put him in your lineup. Just talking to you, Greg Dortch. Let's have ourselves a week.
Well, it's funny you say that. It'll be funny in a second here once we talk about who our picks are.
All right, so Zach, you know how this goes. You get one name. Who you got for this week, my friend?
Well, you just talked about the Detroit Lions defense. They were middle of the pack, actually 11th worst against tight ends last year. They play the Arizona Cardinals this week. Give me Trey McBride coming off a pretty strong week last week. 6 of his targets. He's caught all 6 of his targets. Sorry, for 67 yards on the year. He has 15 targets. He's turned that into 11 receptions, 97 yards, but he hasn't found the end zone yet. I think that changes this week against the Detroit Lions, who I think that you can get them through the air for sure. Obviously, pretty good against the run. I think you can get them through the air, though. You mentioned what Chris Godwin was able to do from the slot. Trey could line up in the slot a bit too, so we'll see if that's how they decide to utilize him. Kyler is balling out right now. I think that he looks back, and I think obviously getting Marvin Harrison in there has made a huge difference for that passing attack, but Kyler just looked more confident as well. I think Drew Petzig is one of the more underrated offensive coordinators in the league as well, and dials up some pretty exotic stuff for that offense. So I really like Trey McBride this week. Thinks he finds the end zone for sure. I don't know. Have you guys changed up at all? Do you give predictions about what they're going to do in the week or no?
I mean, the floor is yours, my king.
I think he's going over 100 and scores a touchdown.
I love it. There you go. So, funny enough, didn't Trey McBride last week have a fumble recovery for a touchdown?
Oh, he might have. I don't know.
I think he did. It was one of the tight ends. It was either him or Kincaid. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been McBride.
I don't see any touchdowns listed here.
Okay.
But maybe it would count. I don't know.
That's fine. I think it was him. I don't know. What do? I just have a fantasy show. Why would I care?
The other part of that too is they scored 41 points and were up big the entire time. So like it was a run heavy script and he was still able to provide that. So yeah. I don't know. For a position that just lacks options, I love me some Trey McBride.
Let's see here. So can I get Marv had the first 2. Yeah, Trey McBride, 4th quarter, 0-yard own fumble return.
Okay.
So I don't know. I guess someone fumbled into the end zone and then they did it.
Interesting.
Big. All right. Well, before I get to mine, we got JTube on the line. One last trade question that we got for the day. So we're looking at Jordan Mason, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Reed, Evans, and Pittman. Zach, any immediate
Jaden Reed?
Did I say Jordan?
Yeah.
Rookie mistake. RIP to he was like the Evan Ingram before Evan Ingram. He was like Mr. Glass. But like when he was in there, baby, so good. Washington Redskins legend.
Mason, Worthy, and Reed for Evans and Pittman. How bad do you need the back? I mean, can you afford to lose the running back? Again, we don't know how long Jordan Mason's going to. What's up with Jordan Mason? Does everybody that's in here have him on their roster? But
I guess clearly, like, because I don't, man, and I have the leagues that I have McCaffrey, I definitely don't, and it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, how bad do you need the back is my question. Like, if you can afford to move forward without getting a running back in this trade, then I like it. I know what Worthy can bring from an explosive play standpoint, but like down to down, I think Rashee Rice is the guy to own in that receiving room. So I think you're getting 2 number 1 option in passing games for, Jordan Mason and 2 guys. They're at best number 2s. I mean, Green Bay's wide receiver is hard to figure out. They're all basically like it could be any one of them. Christian Watson,
it is interesting that you were able to get this offer to me because I think that like even though Chris Godwin had the bigger week to Mike Evans, like somehow Mike Evans is still underrated. Like he had 2 touchdowns in week 1. And people are kind of like, I don't know, like, especially knowing that Jordan Love is still hurt. He may not play next week. He may not play. It looks like he's probably trending in that direction, but it's like Worthy, like, he's going to get minimum touches. Do I feel comfortable putting him in a lineup? Probably not. Mason, obviously, you're banking on the McCaffrey news. But it's like, to me, if you said, hey, I'm getting Mason and Worthy for Evan straight up, like easy smash. So
Yeah.
it's like, and Reed and Pittman to me is kind of the same. I think you're selling low on Reed, or like someone's like buying. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I think that Reed is being undervalued because of the injury. So it's like, to me, like I think it's a good deal. But yeah, to your point, if you don't have the running back depth, like what are we doing here? But I think I would take it. I think Evans is the best player out of those 5. So Pittman and Reed is a wash for me. Although it's interesting, Alex Pierce out of nowhere, they thought they're like, oh, like what's he gonna do? They just drafted his replacement. He's only leading the team in targets, yards, touchdowns. Like it's unbelievable. Football, man. It's dope. All right, we got a defense question here for you, Zach. I don't know if you've been brushing up on defenses at all, but
No.
Raiders, Chargers, Seahawks, Jets, defenses, week 3. I need to look at the lab. The person that I use religiously for defensive information.
I mean, the Raiders play the Panthers. The
Yeah.
Chargers are against the Steelers. The Seahawks play the Dolphins, and the Jets have the Patriots.
I would probably take the Jets out of that group. The Dolphins, I think that there's just too many weapons that they could kind of break it big on a play. I think they're probably going to keep Thompson pretty minimally at risk. So I wouldn't necessarily go there. Raiders and Panthers, not a bad matchup. But I would say, yeah, I think that Jets, Patriots, that Jets defense is really good. There's somebody that I would like for the next week as well. So it's like, to me, that's like a pretty easy play. If somehow the Browns got dropped, that would be my number 1 against the Giants. But yeah, there's a dude, his Reddit username is Subverted Down, SUBVERTADOWN. He posts rankings every week. His rankings: Browns, Jets, Buccaneers, 49ers, Raiders, Steelers, Bills, Chargers. Then he has like a Patreon. You can get like all the ranks and what he's got going on. So cool. All right, we got another trade here, and then I'm going to do my OnlyFans. We're going to wrap it up so that we can do dinner. You can get your swole on. We'll get rolling. Thoughts on A.J. Brown, Joe Burrow, Hunter Henry for Rodgers, Judy, and Montgomery? Bro, no. Please say psych. Unless you are the Rodgers side, what are we doing here? Like, no chance. I don't care if A.J. Brown's hurt. It's not that long term.
Right.
Please don't do it. Just say no. But thanks for watching. Swamp Donkey RL, Rocket League legend, I guess. We'll see.
I think that's somebody probably trying to sell Judy and having a pretty nice week and looking like he's the number 1 in that passing attack, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let me do my OnlyFantasy. Can't let you have all the fun. So this week, also going with the tight end here. If I look at how tight ends have performed, we talked about it earlier. There are, let's see, 24, 25 teams. No, that's not math. That's bad math. It's like 19 teams that are giving under 10 points a game to tight ends in fantasy. There's one team that has been getting absolutely throttled by tight ends. We saw them opening night of the year do what they did to Isaiah Likely. We saw last week Gesicki come back in his terrible gritty ways. So this week, my only fantasy, Kyle Pitts. I really like the way that Kirk performed in that 2-minute drill. I think that's going to give him a lot of confidence into that offense. They got that first win on the board, and they got fined for T-shirt canning celebration with the team.
Yeah.
So I think that Kyle Pitts, he's really been active as far as like route participation, all that stuff. He did have the kind of fluky touchdown week 1 against the Steelers. I think he's going to have a big week, kind of show out in that offense. Teams are attacking the Chiefs up the middle like crazy, really thinking that he has like a top 3 tight end week this week. So,
like the pick.
Yeah. So, around the 412 Fantasy Show loves tight ends. Gotta do what you can. All right. So we got 2 things for you before we wrap up for the day. If you're not following us on X, YouTube, Twitch, you know where to find us. If you have questions going into the week about waivers, if you have questions about lineup decisions, ad drops, trade, you always know where to find us. You can find me at JOEFRK, Zach at Zachary Smith Pittsburgh. As always, easy to find. Just Google anything Steelers. You'll probably see him in there somewhere. You can find our show stuff at AT412FF Show, Around the 412 on YouTube or on Twitch. And we kind of talked about it last week. Zach also mentioned this on Twitter this past week, but kind of like the call to action for our Rocking Around the 412 fundraiser. So Zach, I'm going to turn it over to you so you kind of give people some insight on what that is and where they can kind of find out more information about that.
Yeah, so Joe and Drew have taken over the fantasy football aspect of Around the 412, but Around the 412 goes back to 2017. That was when Tyler, Herb, and I started the original podcast. Tyler and I have continued doing it, but in 2018, I decided I wanted to try to find a way to give back. My mom's a special education teacher. My uncle was a fire chief for a couple of fire departments, and just seeing like the different projects that they're both involved with and the way that they give back, I wanted to try to find a way to do something similar. And my idea, for whatever reason, was just centered around Christmas. And Tyler and I never had to worry about where Christmas was coming from growing up. So we wanted to find a way to provide that type of Christmas to people that otherwise wouldn't have it. So we started collecting money. And in that time, since 2018, we've raised over $32,000, with every penny going directly to providing Christmas in its entirety for as many kids in the 724 and 412 area codes as we can, along with finding individual families within the districts. We've also partnered up with the East Rochester Salvation Army over the last 2 years in the name of our late friend Dalton Keene to adopt kids off their angel tree. He left behind a daughter and his girlfriend at the time. And we reached out to them trying to provide Christmas for his daughter, Isla. And Kaylee said, "We don't want that. Can we do this instead in Dalton's name?" And I just thought that was amazing. So we've been doing that the last 2 years, and we'll continue doing that as well. The GoFundMe is always in the description of all of our shows and stuff, so you can check out the GoFundMe link right there. And then there'll be prizes involved as well. Every year, Tyler gets a set of Penguin tickets, and then we get a bunch of like autographed memorabilia. Obviously, friend of the pod, Pat Fryermuth, will definitely be signing a jersey for it. But I don't know what other prizes we're going to have. Game Changers, who sponsors the pod, certainly will be involved. We'll have some of our own merch. But typically, we do a bunch of, random Steelers, Pirates, Penguins, different autographed memorabilia, and then obviously some jerseys that are also wearable as well. So yeah, rocking around the 412, been going strong. This is year 7 of doing it. We are super excited about where the mission is heading, what we've already been able to achieve, but I think that we still have a lot of goals and boxes that we want to check with it.
Yeah, very cool. So yeah, that is in the description of our YouTube show here. So if you are poking around there, you can definitely find it. Last year, we were able to help 26 kids. I know personally, I'd love to get above 30 this year. I think that'd be super dope. Anything
we've only done that once, 2021, we got above 30.
Yeah. So I would love to get back above that number. Super awesome cause. And yeah, let's get it rocking. So with that, Zach, any closing thoughts before we let it go to get into week 3?
No, like I said, I appreciate you and Drew keeping this thing alive, and my ability to tap in every now and then and check in on what's going on, watch or listen when I can, because I do post it as a podcast for you guys. I go the next day and post it as a podcast.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's listening in that format, but if you are, leave the 5-star review and subscribe, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. But no, I'm glad that you guys continue to do it, and I'm glad to fill in for a week.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely a lot of fun. Drew, we missed you out there today. Hopefully I didn't butcher up any doctoral things. If you need any scripts or anything like that, holler at your boy. Got you covered. But that's going to wrap us up for this week 3 primer. I'm Joe Frick. That's Zachary Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and best of luck in week 3. Thank you.